Well, I'm going to pick on my grandfathers today. I remember as a kid when we were living in Minnesota, both my grandparents would come to visit us. And my grandfather from Colorado, he was a tough old German from New Mexico, and he never gave me much sympathy because he was just such a tough guy. And he would always come and work the whole vacation. We would keep this list of projects around the house for my grandfather. When he would come, he was very handy. He was a maintenance man at the University of Colorado. And I remember thinking, wow, that's amazing. He just continues to work, even right through his vacation. Then we would go to visit my other grandfather in his cabin on a lake up there in Minnesota. And he would get out there in his dress shoes and black socks and shorts, and he would be out raking the beach and sweeping up and cleaning and working. And I remember thinking, man, does this guy never take a break? Well, one German, one Dane, but a tremendous work ethic. Ever heard of the Protestant work ethic? Protestantism, working. Well, Max Weber, a German sociologist, economist, and politician, he actually wrote a book where he traced the origins of the Protestant work ethic back to the Reformation. Now, he said there were multiple reasons. One of the reasons was that in Protestantism, when people left the church of the Middle Ages, they began to uplift everybody and say everybody had a calling. Whether you're a blacksmith or a janitor or a cobbler, or whatever you did, you had a calling. But one of the things that I concentrated on when I was studying for this sermon this week was that he said that really the Protestants, when they came out of the church of the Middle Ages, they'd come out of a church where every week they could go and they could have a sign that they were right with God. They would go to Mass, they would receive the bread and the wine, and they would get absolved by the priest, and you could go home and you could have peace, knowing that you had peace with God, and the church gave you this visible sign that now you are right and you are justified by God and you can go home. Well, when they came out into their Protestant churches, again, they were looking for that assurance, that sign that somehow we are now right with God. And as Weber posits in his book, the Protestants began to say, you know, we're all responsible before God, because now we're not collectively coming to God, we come individually to God. And if we work real hard, and then we see that God is blessing the work of our hands, and then we have material prosperity, then we can feel at peace with God. I think it's a longing for all of us. How do we know we're right with God? And the Protestants got this work ethic to help show that they are right with God and that He was now blessing them. And I want you to think about it this morning. I want to paint a little picture before we get into Genesis 2. Is it pertinent for us today? Let me give you a few statistics here that you can help to see the milieu or the society that we live in. Only 1 in 7 adults in America set aside a day of the week for rest. 1 in 7, 14% of people say we're going to set aside one day where we're not going to be involved in our work. Out of those people, according to Andy Crouch, he did this in the TechWise family, everyday steps for putting technology in its proper place. And this is what he said. Mostly the people out of that 14% say 4 out of those 10 people say they do enjoyable work, and 37% of those 14% say they do work they don't even like on the day they're supposed to rest. Only 1 in 5 out of that 14% say they don't do any work at all on their day of rest. So if you weren't really into math and multiplying fractions, I'll do the math for you. That means that 2.5% of Americans set aside a day of rest and actually don't do any work on it. 2.5%. Let's round up. Let's say out of every 100 people you meet, only 3 people will set aside a full day to actually rest up and recuperate from all the work they've done on the other 6. 3%. 97% of the people we're dealing with here in Orlando, on average, don't have one day they set aside to rest. 97%. Is it pertinent? Church, I believe it is. Genesis 2 starts off with this, because it's talking about the story of creation. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the 7th day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the 7th day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work he had done in creation. Now, A.J. Svoboda, when commenting on this, and for you Russian speakers, it's interesting because Svoboda means freedom. I thought that was interesting. This guy, he wrote a book, interestingly enough, called The Subversive Sabbath, The Surprising Power of Rest in a Non-Stop World by Baker Publishing. If you want to get it, I think it would be an interesting one, especially for us as Seventh-day Adventists. But this is what he says. When examining the creation story, the Sabbath day is a holy day. Interestingly, the only thing God deems as kadosh, which is the Hebrew word for sanctified or holy. The only thing in the story, when you read the creation story, that's holy, in the creation is the Sabbath day. And he says this, the earth, the space, land, stars, animals, even people are not designated as kadosh. The Sabbath day, however, was holy. Abraham Heschel, famous Jewish rabbi, speaks of the Sabbath as the sanctification of time. This is a radical departure, Svoboda says, from accustomed religious thinking. The mythical mind would expect that after heaven and earth have been established, God would create a holy place, a holy mountain, or a holy spring, whereupon a sanctuary is to be established. Yet it seems as if to the Bible it is holiness and time, the Sabbath, which comes first. This holiness of the Sabbath is one of the distinctive marks of Jewish theology, Heschel contends. Again, it is telling that there is no mention of a specific sacred place in the creation story. There is only a sacred day. While space and location are significant, it is important to note that the exact location of even the Garden of Eden is omitted from the story. Yet we know that the Sabbath day is made holy. Time. God takes something invisible that we all have all across this planet, not a place, not a sanctuary, but time, and he consecrates it and makes it holy. Now, one of my favorite preachers when I was living in the former Soviet Union was Alexander Bolotnikov. He used to be a Jewish rabbi, became a Seventh-day Adventist. And he talked about this concept of holiness. And he would ask congregations, church, what is the opposite of holy? Well, if you had to define the opposite of holy, what would you say? And a lot of Christians say, well, probably like sinful. They said, wrong. It's not sinful. The opposite of holy is unholy. For you see, the Hebrew word kadosh actually means to sanctify something, to set it apart, to designate it. And he tells the story of how at Jewish weddings, a bride and a groom, when they hand the ring to each other, will say, this is a sign that you are now holy to me. You are wholly mine. I am designating myself. You are designating yourself for me. Out of all the men in the world, out of all the women in the world, we are now special to each other. We are kadosh. We are holy. So this is a dedicated day. God took this time in the creation story and he set it aside and he said, this is my time with you. And it became so important that he actually reminds the Israelites when they're leaving Egypt. And he says, this is something I don't want you to forget. And in Exodus 20, I'll read the commandment to you. And I want you to pay attention because we're looking at the commandment in relationship to the creation story. Exodus 20 says that, verse 8 says this, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it kadosh, holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, even your animals are not to do any work, nor the alien or the guest within your gates. For in 6 days, and notice, the commandment takes us where? Back to the creation story. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it kadosh, holy. No work. Now, if you, like me, have grown up in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, you will realize that we can get into some very interesting discussions. I remember when I was working at youth camp in Kansas one summer, and our camp director, Charlie Thompson, was very nice, and he allowed some of the counselors, he took us all out in a van, and we headed off the campus, and we left all of our kids with a few unlucky counselors who got to stay on the camp and look after our kids. Charlie was a great guy, and if Charlie's watching, Charlie, I love you. But Charlie wasn't the most organized person, and we got in the van, and we were driving along, and we realized that we were right at E on the gas gauge. Oh, man, Charlie said, I hope we have enough gas to get back to camp. And we were thinking, yeah, we do too, before the kids burn our cabins down. And sure enough, a few miles from the camp, actually it was more than that, probably 5-6 miles from the camp, and the van dies. So we're all sitting there on Sabbath with no gas in the van. And I remember the discussion that ensued. And you can imagine, those of you who've been in the Adventist church and in Adventist gatherings, well, man, what do we do? We got to buy gas. I mean, do we buy gas on the Sabbath? Not buy gas on the Sabbath? And I was just sitting there looking at my watch, thinking, man, I hope my boys aren't destroying that cabin. I hope everything's going all right. Let's just buy gas and get back, right? But you notice all of these discussions are not in the commandment. The commandment is very clear. It says, don't work. Don't do it. I'm not allowing you to work. Now let's go back to the statistics I just read you. 97% of people in this country don't have a day when they have permission from the Creator God to just say, stop, don't do it, take care of yourself. Now we can also joke in the Adventist church about lay activities on Sabbath afternoon. I've always remembered those jokes. Well, I need to go do some lay activities this Sabbath afternoon, right? Good for you. Good for you. Any of you relate to a good Sabbath afternoon nap? There's something about that weekly cycle. During the French Revolution, they tried to make the week 10 days, not 7. It didn't work. They couldn't do it. They were getting rid of it. It just didn't work. There's something about the human clock that about every 7 days, I feel it. Man, I'll be doing some lay activities probably this afternoon for a while. You have that sense of, man, you go to church or you have a nice worship with your kids, when we've been on this pandemic on the beach or at home. Oh, I'm just tired. And you go and you hit the pillow and you just have that nice long Sabbath afternoon nap. It's God designed. Rest up. Take care of yourself. It's interesting that God sees the main root of human condition is that there's something that always urges us. There's always another project that we could do. Have you ever been around looking around the house, and even on Sabbath, sometimes I've been, oh man, did I not do that? What about this? What about that? And God says, don't do it. Would you take a break? Rest up. Take care of yourself. Spend time with me. Because when you really think about it, what's the amazing thing about it is that the commandment ties the Sabbath back to the Creator God, that He's this unbelievably powerful, what we went over last week, being able to speak things into existence, this wonderful, fantastic universe that scientists are still debating. Is it infinite or does it have a boundary somewhere? And every time we start talking about infinity, it blows my mind and I can't think about it because it's something that doesn't end, it just doesn't make sense. But scientists are debating this massive universe that God remembers our address, where we are on this planet, and He dedicated a day, 24 hours, and He says, you know what, I am an example to you, even though the Bible says He never gets weary, He never gets tired, He doesn't need a nap, He has abundance of energy, and yet He takes time off and spends it with us. Amazing. And He says, I care about you so much that I want you to rest. I want you to be rested. Psychologically, emotionally, physically rested. The founder of secular Judaism, Ahad Haham, is his name. He had a famous saying. And most Jews probably wouldn't even consider him particularly religious. But this is what he said. More than Jews have kept Shabbat, or Sabbath, Shabbat, and you can probably finish it, has kept the Jews. This group of people that God gave the Sabbath to bless all of humanity with. When Ahad looked at his own people, with all the different internal fighting and being the diaspora and going all around the world, the Sabbath is so powerful that even a secular Jew would say, maybe the Sabbath has kept us together as a people. Sabbath. It's one of the institutions that God set up for us in the Garden of Eden as humanity. But I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to go a little bit because to our Adventist thinking of eschatology or end-time events. Because I was just talking with Andres in between services, and I don't know about you, but if God's not trying to give us some signs that we're in the very end of time before Jesus comes back, wildfires, hurricanes, pandemic. I mean, what else do we need to go wrong in 2020? Maybe God is calling us back to the original story to understand the heart, His heart, what he designed the planet for, what He has in store for us as a people. And as Adventists, you can see it right in our church name. You can go to whatever 80,000, 100,000 churches all around the world, and there it is, Seventh-day Adventists. So here we are, with the seventh day in our name. And sometimes it appears that, yes, hey, world, we got the right day and you have the wrong one. Right? And sometimes it appears in our eschatology that God is going to come and deliver those who chose the right day versus those who chose the wrong one. And skeptics sometimes look at us and think, really? I just got the wrong day and God's going to toss me into hell? Well, you Adventists, you kind of have a narrow conception of who this God is. I want us to think about it a little bit in an end-time perspective, and I want us to use a couple paradigms that we've talked about the last few weeks. Number one, the Patron Paradigm. Let's look at God as patron in Genesis 1. God gave Adam and Eve the whole planet. Now, I know some of you probably have some pretty decent-sized yards. I've been over to Les and Margaret's yard. It's a beautiful yard. But compared to the whole planet, I'm sorry, guys, it's kind of a tiny little, chunk of land. Adam and Eve had the whole planet. I stood there in Armenia on a mountain that I believe Noah ended up in, and I started to think about it, and I thought, if I was Noah coming out of the ark, I would be walking onto a planet that is uninhabited except me and my family. And Adam and Eve was even more so. 2 people, the whole planet. That is, God gave them everything. All the natural resources, all of the animals they wanted, talk about being wealthy. You've got your own planet. So God here is given generously, and he gives them dominion over it, and he says, reproduce, multiply, and this is yours and your descendants forever. And next week, Andres is going to preach on family and reproduction and how God gave that as a gift out of the Garden of Eden. But we're looking this morning at this time that God was going to come spend. And I want you now, not just the patron-client paradigm, but remember a couple weeks ago I talked about honor and shame. And in the Middle East, honor is, as I mentioned, is so important. And one of the main ways people honor each other in the Middle East to this day is by presence. You invite me to your birthday party, I come, and I honor you with my presence as a guest. At a funeral, you want the village to come out and honor the person, and you honor them by your presence. Or at a wedding, or when you invite somebody to come over. And if you read the story through the lens of somebody that has grown up in an honor and shame culture, much like Moses had, you see that the great patron that gave Adam and Eve everything is now honoring Adam and Eve with his presence. And he says, this is my day with you. I'm going to visit. It's a date. Now I want us to think. I'm going to talk to the husbands here for a minute. Can you imagine? Because really, this is kind of like a date. Even once we're married, we still need to have those date nights. And can you imagine, husbands, if your wife says, you know what, I've got Tuesday nights available every week. I've got other stuff on other nights, but man, Tuesday night, let's have a date night. You're like, oh, great idea, honey. That's fantastic. And so she drives to the restaurant because she's going to meet you after work. And you're like, I don't know, Tuesday night? How about Wednesday? So you show up on Wednesday. And she sat there 2 hours waiting for you on Tuesday night. Now, husbands, you tell me, how's that going to go at home? What's the conversation going to be like? Will she just be, oh, honey, I totally understand. We all get days mixed up. No. I told you Tuesday. Oh, okay. Let's do it next week. All right, next week comes. Tuesday night, she shows up at the restaurant, ready to meet you, have a nice night, talk. I think Wednesday again is good. Wednesday works better for me. You don't show up. How's that second conversation going to go at home? Probably markedly worse than the first one. And let's say that doesn't happen once or twice or 30 or 40 times. Let's say it happens every week for a year. Can the marriage make it? When you deliberately choose to not spend time at the time that your wife has chosen. Please, you know how they say on dangerous stunts, do not try this at home? I should put that. Mark, can you put that on the screen? Do not try this at home, husbands, because it's a dangerous thing. Let's look at Sabbath in those terms for the end of times. Here is God. He's given a sign. Let's go back to the Protestants that wanted a sign that they are saved, that they are with God, that God is with them. And in Ezekiel 20, we see in the Old Testament, God says, if you want a sign, Israelites, here's a sign. I'm giving it to you. Here are my Sabbaths. These will be a sign for you and your children that it is I who sanctify you, that it is I who am your Savior, and that we are married. You have 24 hours. You don't have to do anything. I will take care of you, because it's counterintuitive in a capitalistic society to think that you can get further ahead by working less. And yet God challenges his people and he says, you know what? I am with you. I will bless you with my grace, with my presence. I have dedicated this time. I have sanctified it. It is kadosh for me, just like in a wedding ceremony. Let's meet. And Christendom for 1,500 years says, no thanks. We'll go on another day. Now we make a big deal, seventh versus first day, but it really doesn't matter because really Adam's first Sabbath was on what day of the week for him? The first. He was created on day 6. He observed us. Was he tuckered out from his big long week of a couple hours? See, the point isn't the number and the day. The point is, when does the patron ask you to honor him because he's honoring you? So the issue really isn't the day. The issue is the relationship, the honoring with what God's done for me in my life. Would I have the boldness just to raise my fist at him and say, yeah, whatever? When I look at what God's done in my life, I mean, is it not the least I could do to say, you know what? Seventh versus first day, that's what God set aside for the universe? Well, I mean, why not? What good reason would I have to tell him, like just your wife, well, honey, after the 48th time you've missed Tuesday night date, oh, I just forgot again. Do you think she's going to buy that? No. Could it be that it's rebellion? And here is what 1 Samuel 15, this is what the Bible says about rebellion. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. If we just tell God, sorry, nope, I'm not doing it that way. God says that's like playing with voodoo dolls. It's like just completely leaving him, and it's like witchcraft. It doesn't glorify him at all. In fact, I was reading this week devotionally in Ezra, and it struck me because I was getting ready for this sermon, where when the Jews were coming back out of exile, this is what God says: whoever does not obey the law of God, Ezra 7:26, whoever does not obey the law of God and the law of the king must surely be punished by death, banishment, confiscation of property, or imprisonment. That is, he had to remind them, guys, I'm doing all of this for you. I'm honoring you, bringing you back, going to give you your own land. Just obey my law and the law of the king. Otherwise, the punishment was great. Sometimes we look at it, oh, why so severe? Maybe it's because back in Numbers 15, it says, but anyone who sins defiantly or a high-handed sin, Numbers 15 verse 30 says this, but anyone who sins defiantly, right at God, whether native born or foreigner, blasphemes the Lord and must be cut off from the people of Israel. Because they have despised the Lord's word and broken his commands, they must surely be cut off. Their guilt remains on them. And key being guilt remains on them. Why is that, folks? If we defiantly sin against God, there's nothing Jesus can do. He can't reach us. Does he love us any less? No. Does God not want to help us out? No. Yeah, of course he wants to help us out. He's a God of love. He doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the same God he was in Genesis 1, he's the same God for us today. But if we raise our fist, we tell him, sorry, buddy, we're going our own way. There's nothing he can do. Paul echoes it in the New Testament, Hebrews 10:26. If we deliberately keep on sinning after we've received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sins is left. And what did the Old Testament say? Our guilt remains on us. What is Jesus asking us? This is what he says, Matthew 11. We read it for our main text. The Lord of the Sabbath, Jesus, says this, who made Sabbath for man. It says it was a gift to mankind. And every time I read these words, I think of Sabbath. Come unto me, all you who are weary and burdened. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Is it that much to ask of us? And it's almost like God has to ask us to take care of ourselves. It's really weird. Because if we read those statistics we read at the beginning of the sermon, and 97% of people aren't even taking time for themselves to recuperate and rest, and God had to make a law for our sake. And even that, we tell them, nope, sorry. We'll do it our way. It makes more sense when you look at it from honor and shame, when you look at it from a patron's point of view, that Sabbath is the greatest gift God could have given us in the garden. A weekly date with our Creator. And now that we've seen Jesus and His glory on the cross, and we've seen that He took everything for us, and Jesus wants to meet us, have a weekly date with us, and give us rest. I ask you, church, don't you want to say every Sabbath, happy Sabbath? I mean, when we say it, it's not just words. Happy, it really is. It's blessed. Why? Because Sabbath is good.